Welcome to this YSL Report Builder tutorial. This video looks at how to split and join text. We'll start the video by looking at how to split a single string into an array of substrings. We'll then explain how you can refer to the individual items in the array and also count how many there are. We'll spend a bit of time looking at how you can avoid referring to elements in an array which don't actually exist. And then the final part of the video looks at how to join the array of substrings back into a single string using different delimiter characters. So let's get started. To get started, I've created a new report, and as usual, the first thing I'll do in here is create a connection to the YSL Movies database. As a quick reminder, if you don't already have that installed, you can use this video to help you get it set up, and there's a link in that video's description you can use to download the required files. Assuming you've done that part already, let's head back to the report data window, right-click the data sources folder, and choose to add a data source. I'll call mine Movies, as I usually do. Choose to use an embedded connection, make sure it's going to connect to a Microsoft SQL server, and then click the Build button at the right-hand side to avoid having to type in our connection string. For the server name, I'll type in a shortcut to my local host, so /, followed by the name of the instance of SQL Server I'm going to use. In my case, that's SQL 2017. From the drop-down list at the bottom of the dialog box, then I can select my Movies database, click OK a couple of times, and there's my data source created. I'll right-click on the data source then and choose to add a data set which uses it, and I'll call this one Movie Roles. There's only really one column I'm particularly interested in for this video, but I'm going to select a couple of extra columns just so we can see some more useful information. So I'm going to go for the Query Designer, and then from the Tables folder, I'll head to the Actor table and choose Full Name. Then from the Film table, I'll choose Title. And from the Role table, the one that I'm really interested in, I want the Role column. Having done that, I'm going to click OK and then OK again. I'll add a basic table to my report to display that information, but I'll tidy up first by getting rid of this title text box and also removing the page footer. Then I can insert a new table into the report, display those three columns in the order I've selected them, so full name, title and role. I'll modify something about the font just to make sure that I see all the text in the table. So this font display bug, which sometimes affects when you run the report, you don't see all the text. So I'll switch to any other font and then back to the original. I'll do some basic formatting for the column headers, as I normally do. And then I'll just change the column width a little as well to make it slightly easier to read, I hope. And then a quick run of the report and we'll see what we end up with. In the previous video, we looked at how to separate the full names of our actors into a first name and a last name based on working out the position of the space character which separates the two. So we used a combination of the inString function to find the location of the space, and the left function to return everything to the left of that, and then either the right or the mid function to return everything to the right of that. We expanded on that a little bit and we looked at how to find the first and the last space. So for people who have a middle initial or a middle name, we then looked at how to extract the middle name as well. In this video, we're going to do something similar, but we're going to base this on the role column, and we're going to look for actors who have played multiple roles in the same films. The way that I've indicated that for most of the characters is I've separated them with a / character. So we're going to separate out Peter Parker and Spider-Man, Norman Osborn, Green Goblin, etc, etc. But we're not going to do that using the same technique we used in the previous video. We're going to use a new function entirely called split. So let's head back to the design view, and I'm going to start by adding a new calculated field to my Movies Roles dataset. I'll call this first column or this first field Role 1, although initially it won't actually calculate that, but we'll get onto that in just a moment. And then I'll hit the FX button to launch the expression builder. If I go to my common functions category, I'll find the text category and then scroll down towards the end of that list to find the function called split. The split function returns an array of values, and it works based on the idea that you pass in a reference to the field which has all of the values contained in it, and you say which character separates the individual elements you want to extract. So for us, if I just insert my split function by double clicking on it, I'm then going to go to my fields list and double click the role column, and then I'm going to type in a comma, and in some double quotes I'm going to type in the / character. That's what separates the individual roles for my actors. If I then close the parentheses or the round brackets at the end, the final expression should look like so. And having done that, I'm going to click OK a couple of times, and that's the calculation created. The problem with it is that I can't actually display that in my table. If I try to drag the role 1 column in there, now what we've calculated so far is an entire array of values. If somebody has multiple roles, if they have 2 or 3 roles, then this column or this field contains an array of all of the items in individual compartments. And I can't display all of those individual compartmentalized values in a single table cell. If I try to run it, it will fail for everybody. In order to return something meaningful to this table cell, I need to specify which element of the array I want to return. I can't show the entire thing, I can return one single thing at a time. To do that, I need to enter the number of the element that I want to return. So I'll head back to the design view, and then I'll right click on my role 1 column and choose field properties. And then I'll click the FX button to get back to the expression builder. Just before I enter the number, it's worthwhile knowing how the numbering system works. I'm going to go back to the text category of common functions and then select the split function. And the description there tells me that this returns a zero-based array. So all of the elements of the array, all the compartments of the array are numbered, and in the split function the compartments start numbering from 0. So the first item is numbered as 0. So to get the first element from the array, after the closed round brackets from the split function, I can open up some more round brackets, enter the number 0 to get the first element, and then close the round brackets. So the final expression should look like so. If I then zoom back out and then click OK a couple of times, when I run the report now, I should see that every single person gets a first role. So even if there is no / character in the role text, then it returns all of the text into the first element of the array. For people like Peter Parker and Norman Osborn, we get just everything to the left of the / character. That also includes the extra space character there to the left-hand side of the /. Not every single role in this database has a space either side of the first / character, but if they do, I'd want to make sure that we don't include that extra trailing space or leading space character. So a quick simple way to get rid of the leading or trailing space character is to trim the string that's been returned. So to do that, let's head back to the design view. We'll right click the role 1 column and choose field properties, click the FX button, and then I'm just going to wrap the trim function around the existing expression. So after the equal sign, trim, open some round brackets, and then close an extra set of round brackets at the end. Trim is a function we've used in a variety of the most recent videos in this series, so just another instance of using trim. There's no noticeable difference when you look at the results. If I click OK a couple of times and then run the report, you can't really tell that the trailing space has been removed because it wasn't visible in the first place, but we have the satisfaction of knowing that we've done it. Before we continue and extract the other elements contained in the array, I'd like to be able to sort my list by the number of roles an actor has played in a film. One way to do that is by using a property of the array, which tells you how many items it contains. So to do that, let's head back to the design view, and I'm going to right click my movie roles dataset and choose to add a new calculated field, and I'm going to call this one role count. I'll click the FX button at the right hand side, and then head back to common functions, text, and then head down to towards the bottom of the list and double click the split function. Having done that, I can then insert a reference to my role column. So I'll go back to my fields list and double click role, type in a comma, open some double quotes, /, close the double quotes, and then close the round brackets. Now it isn't immediately apparent that you can do this using the expression builder in Report Builder, because there's no help and no IntelliSense, unfortunately. But if I type in a full stop after the closed parenthesis, I can then refer to properties of the array that I've just generated. So the property of the array which tells you how many items it contains is called length. So the entire expression should look like so. And having done that, I'm just going to place that column into my table. So I'm going to place the roll count column into the table somewhere. Let's place it just before the initial roll. And then I also want to apply sorting to my table so that it shows the actors with the most rolls at the top of the list. To do that, I need to make sure that I've clicked somewhere inside the table. I can then right click on one of the grey boxes around the outside and choose Tablix or Tablix properties. Head to the sorting page, add a sort and choose to sort by the roll count, and I want to go in descending order, Z to A. So I'll select Z to A from the order drop down list. Once I've done that, I can click OK and then run the report again. And we'll see this time we should have brought towards the top of the list people who have played multiple roles in the same film. Let's continue and return the second role that each actor has played in a film. We can head back to the design view, and then we can right click on the movies roles dataset and choose add calculated field. I'll call this one role 2, and then rather than typing this out again from scratch, I'm going to cheat a little bit. I'm going to hit the FX button next to role 1, and then I'm going to copy the entire expression except for the equals operator at the beginning. Copy that to the clipboard and click OK once, then click the FX button next to role 2 and simply paste in what I've copied. I then just need to update the number of the element of the array that I'm returning. So rather than a 0, I want to return the second element, so I'm going to enter the number 1. If I click OK and OK again, I can then add my role 2 column to my table. I'm just going to change the width of the role 1 column a little bit to give myself a bit more space, and then drag the role 2 column to the end of that table. Now that I've done that, I can run the report again, and I've got the second role for each actor in a film. One thing we need to consider here is what if an actor only plays a single role in a film? We've asked to return a value from the second element, but what if there is no second element to return a value from? A fairly easy way to find out is to click on the last button on the toolbar to navigate to the last page, and here we'll find actors who've only played a single role in a film, and predictably we've returned an error. So what can we do to solve that? Well, we have a few options, but a fairly sensible approach would be to check what the number of the roles is. If the count is less than 2, then we could try to return either an empty string or a nothing, which would both appear as an empty cell in the end results. Otherwise, we can return the value from the second element. Let's head back to the design view, and then we can right click on our role 2 column and choose field properties. We'll click the FX button to launch the expression builder, and then I want to wrap an if function around this existing expression. So just after the equals operator, I can either type in the if function, or I can find if in the program flow category. So I can double click the if function. I can then head back to my fields list and insert the roll count field, and I can check if it's less than 2 or equal to 1 if you prefer. If that's the case, I'm going to type in a comma, and then I'd like to return an empty string. I could return a nothing, but I'm going to go for an empty string in this example. Otherwise, I would like to return the trimmed split element 1 of the roll array. And I need to make sure I've closed an extra set of round brackets at the end of that string. I'm just going to tidy this up a little bit by taking each parameter down onto a separate line, which argument onto a separate line, and then indenting those by typing in a few spaces, just to make it a little easier to read. And the end expression should look like this. Cool. So logically that makes sense. If the roll count is less than 2, give me an empty string. Otherwise, give me the value from the second element, or element number 1. However, when we click OK and we attempt to run this, the first few rows will look fine. I'm still returning the value from the second element where 1 exists. Unfortunately, however, it's done absolutely nothing to solve our hash error problem. This is a kind of annoying feature of the if function in Report Builder. It doesn't do what is referred to as short circuit. So some if functions will short circuit. If the result of the initial logical test is true, it returns that answer and doesn't bother evaluating the false part. However, in Report Builder, every element of the if function, or every part of the if function, is evaluated regardless of whether or not it's returned. So unfortunately, because this does return an error, even though we're not returning it for actors who only have one role, I still see the error message in the cell. So we need a slightly different approach. So in order to make this work, we have to guarantee that every part of our if function returns a valid value, regardless of whether it's the one displayed as the final answer. That means we can't get away with hard coding the number 1 here, because that will, of course, as we've seen, return an error in some cases. We need to calculate what numbered element to return, and we have quite a few choices for how to do that. Rather than nesting the expression inside the round brackets here, just to explain the separate technique in a different column, I'm going to cancel from the expression builder. And while I'm here, I'm going to click the Add button to choose to add a new calculated field. And then let's say, let's call this one roll to element number. Hopefully that will make sense. Roll to element number. So I want to calculate either the number 1 or the number 0. It should be the number 0 if the actor only has one role. Otherwise, it's the number 1. If I click the FX button, a fairly low-tech way to do this is using the if function that we've just seen. So I can either insert or type in the if function. I'll type it in this time, IIF, open some round brackets. And then from my fields list, I can double-click the roll count, and I can check whether that is less than 2 or equal to 1 if you prefer. If that's the case, I know there's only one role for the actor, so I want to return element number 0. Otherwise, I want to return element number 1, and then I can close the round brackets, and that will guarantee that I get the correct element number according to how many roles the actor's played. Once I've done that, I'm going to click OK and then OK again, and I'll just pop that into the table just so that we can see. I'll pop that in just before the roll to column, just so we can see that for actors with multiple roles, eventually, when it finally appears. Taking a little time to run this time, but eventually when we do finally get there, any moment now, there we go. For actors with multiple roles, either 2 or 3, it returns element number 1. If I scroll to the last page, for actors with a single role, it returns element number 0. So we just need to plug that number into our final expression to calculate roll 2. So let's head back to the design view, and then I'll right click the roll 2 field and choose to view its properties. Head back to the expression builder by clicking the FX button, and then rather than having the number 1 there, I'm just going to backspace the number 1 out. Head back to my fields list and then insert roll 2 element number by double clicking on it. Of course, we could have nested that if function inside this expression, although it gets a little messy when you do things like that. If I then click OK and OK again, I can then run the report, and we should see, again, hopefully this doesn't take quite as long to run this time, although it seems that it is going to. There we go. So I've got for people with multiple roles, I still get their second role. If I navigate to the last page, for people with a single role, that column is now empty. So that's working quite nicely. To calculate the name of the third role for the actors which have them takes a similar approach. We need to calculate a valid element number to return and then pass that into the function which returns that specific element from the array. So to make that work, let's take a slightly different approach. I'm going to use a different function for this. I'm going to head back to the design view, and I'm going to right click Movies Roles and add a new calculated field. Let's start by calculating the element number. I'm just going to copy and paste the previous column name and then just edit the number so it's roll 3 element number. I'll hit the FX button to launch the expression builder, and then rather than using an if function, what I'm trying to do this time, I want to calculate the lower of two different values. So for actors who have 3 roles, I want to calculate the number 2. So one of the 2 values I want to return is the number 2. The other number I want to return is the highest numbered element for any individual actor's array of roles. So for actors who have only a single role, I want to return the number 0. For actors who only have 2 roles, I want to return the number 1. And for actors who have 3 roles, I want to return the number 2. The function which allows you to return the lower of 2 values is called min. There's a small problem with the min function in Report Builder. The default min function, you'll find it in a couple of places. It's in the math category, listed as min in there. You'll see it refers to an entire column of values. So the idea behind the min function is it returns the lowest value in an entire field. And it's also in the aggregate category as well. You'll find min in there as well. Exactly the same function, however. That's not the version of the min function that I want or need. I want a version of the min function that is in a separate namespace. So to reference this function in the first place takes a little more work. I need to type in a reference to the system namespace, followed by a full stop, and then the math category, followed by another full stop, and then the name of the min function in the math system namespace. So I then want to open up some round brackets and specify my 2 numbers. First of all, the number 2. Otherwise, I want the basically 1 value less than the number of roles. So I'm going to go to my fields list and double click the roll count field and then simply subtract 1 from it. So that will calculate the highest numbered element of the array for each actor. It's a bit less typing than the if function, I think, just about, maybe. It's a slightly more sophisticated approach, but if I click OK and click OK, and then I want to insert that column into my table, I'll just scroll across a little bit and drag that column to the end of my table. And then if I run the report, I should find that the number I'm generating for each actor is the number 2 for those characters or for those actors who have 3 roles, the number 1 for those actors who have 2 roles, and for everyone else with just a single role in the film, they get the number 0. So now that I've calculated that number, I can correctly plug that into the next function, which is going to calculate the name of the role. So to make that work, let's go back to the movies roles dataset. I'm going to right click and add a calculated field, and I'm going to call this one role 3. Then I'm just going to do a quick bit of cheating again. I'm going to head back to the role 2 expression, and I'm going to copy that entire thing and then click OK, or cancel, it doesn't really matter. Then hit the FX button next to the role 3 column and paste it in place of what was already there. So this time I want to check if the actor has fewer than 3 roles. I want to return an empty string. Otherwise, I want to return the element from the array whose number is equal to not role 2 element number, but role 3 element number. So I've made 2 simple changes there. I've changed the logical test to check for values less than 3, and then return the value of the role 3 element number column. Having done that, I can click OK a couple of times, and then make sure I've got some space to drag this field into my table. So I'll drag in the role 3 column, running out of space now, of course. Let's run the report and check what we get. So hopefully you can see I've got, for actors with 3 roles, Kal-El, Clark Kent, Superman, Kal-El in role 1, Clark Kent in role 2, and Superman in role 3. For actors with only 2 roles, I get an empty cell, and of course, as you'd expect, for actors with only a single role, we get an empty cell as well. So while the split function's a much easier way to separate your bits of text out into their separate elements, it's a lot more tricky to actually reference those elements if you have a differing number for each row. But at least we can do it, and there's some interesting ideas for how that works. Now that we've looked at how to split our text apart into its different components, for the final part of the video we're going to look at how to put it all back together again, but in a slightly different way. What I'd like to be able to do is take each role and split them based on the position of the / character, but then put them back together with a new line character in between each one. So we're going to produce a sort of a vertical list of roles played by an actor in a film. So to make that work, we're going to go back to the design view, and I'm going to add a new calculated field to my dataset. I'll call this one role list, and then hit the FX button to launch the expression builder. The starting point is, as we've done previously, I want to split the roles based on the / character. So from the text category of common functions, I'm going to insert the split function. From the movie roles dataset, I'm going to insert the role field, and then I'm going to type in a / character in some double quotes and close the round brackets. So that part splits apart the array into its different, splits the string into an array of multiple elements. Now I want to put them all back together again, but instead of using a / character, I want to get a new line character between them. To do that, there's a function that does essentially the opposite of what the split function does. It joins text back together again. So if I look in the text category, there's a join function, and it tells you that it joins together a number of substrings contained in an array. So I want to click just after the equal sign, double click the join function, and the array that I'm trying to join together again is what I've just split apart. After that, I'm going to type in a comma. And there are various ways to specify a new line character. If you've watched the previous videos in this series, you'll probably remember one of them being VBCRLF, Visual Basic Carriage Return Line Feed. Having done that, I'm just going to close the round brackets, and the final expression looks like so. And then if I click OK and OK again, I'm just going to tidy up the table by deleting most of these extra columns I've added in. I'm going to get rid of all of those, and then I'll get rid of the role count as well. I don't need that displayed. And then I'm just going to drag the role list column to the end of the table. If I now run the report, I should see everyone with multiple roles having those roles listed on separate lines. So there we go, that's what the join function does. I'm not sure there's much point in doing that, to be brutally honest, but it's interesting to know that you can, and the join function does certainly come in handy, as you'll see later on in the series. The one last thing I'd like to solve is this issue where the roles separated using a space and a / and a space have still got these leading and trailing spaces, whereas the ones with just a / and no spaces look a bit neater. Now annoyingly, I can't just simply apply the trim function to the entire string returned by the join function, because trim only takes spaces from the start and end of the entire string, and that won't work with what we've joined together. So what I'd like to do is the string of text that I split apart in the first place, I want to replace any sequences of a space, / and a space with just a / character. We've used the replace function in a previous video, but just as a very quick reminder as to how it works, I'm going to right click on my role list column and choose field properties. Head to the FX button to launch the expression builder, and I want to replace what I'm splitting apart initially. So I'm going to click just after the open round brackets after the split function, head to the common functions category, text, and then find the replace function. I can double click to insert that. The text that contains the information I'm going to replace is fields role.value. I'll then type in a comma and type in what I'm looking for. So what I'm looking for, in some double quotes, is a space, a / and a space, and then close the double quotes. I want to replace that set of characters with just a / character. So that's a comma to move on to the next parameter, then in some double quotes, a / character. Finally, I need to close the round brackets for the replace function. So the entire thing looks like so. Okay, having done that, I can click OK a couple of times, run the report, and then I'll see that these columns where there were previously leading and trailing spaces have now been tidied up a bit, so that looks a bit neater. So there we go, some techniques for splitting and joining text. Whether you'll find some of those useful or not, I'm not entirely sure, but it's an interesting set of techniques and looks a slightly more technical approach to the ones we've used in the previous video to split names. Regardless of whether you found it useful, thanks for watching. See you next time.